Well, good evening, and thank you for that lovely introduction. Joy, she was a star as an editorial writer. I know she would be because she was a great reporter. And in fact, before I considered anybody for the job on the editorial page, they had to be a good reporter. Because if you didn't know the facts, then the opinion didn't matter. Anyway, thanks for the press club. Thank you to the press club for the honor, and congratulations to the club on its 50th anniversary dinner. That's quite an accomplishment. Also, a salute to my fellow inductees, Jennifer McLaughlin, Jack Graves, and to the family of Pat Cowles. This has not been an easy time to be a journalist, let alone stay in the business as long as they have. And a special recognition to Larry Levy, who used part of his induction speech last year to make the case for me. It almost makes up for all the headaches he managed to create for me over the years. And thanks to Ray and Kathy Jansen for being here tonight. An editorial page editor could not have asked for a better publisher than Ray. A publisher with the soul of a journalist. Also to my family for coming out, including my 4 grandchildren, who I'm certain had better things to do tonight. But I want to especially recognize my wife, Judy. I was so involved with events as a Washington reporter, covering foreign affairs, the White House, and various campaigns, that the people in Columbia, Maryland, where we lived for 10 years, thought she was a single mom. One example, when I first arrived in Washington, I would attend the daily State Department briefings, especially when it seemed to be news about the Mideast, in some ways a local story for Newsday. Pat Sloyan, a veteran Washington correspondent in the Bureau, said to me with a shrug, "You're wasting your time. Nothing new is going to happen over there." Just then, the UPI machine went off with 5 bells, which back then meant a truly breaking story. Today, everything is a breaking story, then nothing's a breaking story. Sadat was going to Israel. My editor said, "Get yourself to Israel now." Judy met me at Dulles Airport with the suitcase. It was a great story to cover because it was essentially a good news story, rare in our business. When Sadat went back to Egypt, my editors, thinking peace was at hand, had me stay in Cairo for almost a month. A peace agreement would take a year to negotiate. There were just too many complex details and years of conflict to overcome. Sound familiar? Because the phone system was not workable in Cairo, the office could call me, but I could not call them. Or more to the point, Judy or the kids. Finally, Judy traveled to the office to talk with me. I asked how the kids were doing, and Judy told me that the nursery school teacher, a friend, had asked our 3.5-year-old son, Jason, where his daddy had been. Jason replied, "Oh, my daddy, he's dead." It's a true story. I was on the next plane back. In fact, one aspect of my career is how unlucky I was in the beats I was assigned to cover. Sadat's visit is only one example. Something big seemed to be happening wherever I went. Or maybe it was just my attitude that if I was going to do it, it had to be big. For instance, just after I was named Albany bureau chief, Nelson L. Rockefeller resigned after 15 years as governor. A big story in itself. A year later, a little-known congressman from Brooklyn, Hugh Carey, was elected governor, but was almost immediately faced with the very real possibility that New York City would go bankrupt bringing the state and who knows what else with it. But back in those days, the state Senate was controlled by Republicans. Imagine suburban and upstate Republicans being told they must bail out those spendthrift, downstate, big city socialists. Some of you might remember the New York Post headline when Kerry asked President Gerald Ford for help. Ford to the city, drop dead. In September 1978, just after the Camp David Accords, Newsday sent me to Iran to report on the Long Island-built Grumman fleet of F-14 jet fighters the U.S. had sold to Iran, and the suburban-style village just outside the historic city of Esfahan that had been built for hundreds of employees from Grumman to teach Iranians how to fly and maintain the fighters. The Shah of Iran was still in power then. As my taxi drove through the crowded, noisy streets of Esfahan, someone jammed a paper card into my window that read, "Oh, cursed Yankee, go home." The next evening, I had to abandon my hotel because an anti-Shah mob had tried to burn it down. And the next week, when I had returned to Tehran, a much larger mass of anti-Shah demonstrators tried to sack the British embassy. My editor was only concerned I wouldn't do the Grumman story. I told him there was something going on as well. In fact, it was the beginning of the end. In less than a year, the Ayatollahs took power. In 1995, I was in Tel Aviv at an academic conference on the future of democracy in Israel. By then, I had moved back to Long Island to be editor of the editorial pages, the opinion section of the paper. Newsday believed in a strict separation between the news side and opinion. On my second evening in Tel Aviv, we got word that Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin had been shot and killed by a right-wing, ultra-nationalist Jewish fanatic. I think, unfortunately, they're now running the government. It was only 10 minutes from where we were having dinner. For the next week, I was back on the news side. 5 years later, in 2000, Ray Jansen and I were taking a trip to Cuba. But on the day we landed, the news broke that the 5-year-old young boy who had been discovered floating in a boat in the Florida Keys had been rescued off the coast and brought to Miami to live with an uncle, but now had to bring him back to his father in Cuba. It was a major story for weeks. I was able to stay out of that story because we had an editor for the news site traveling with us. Meanwhile, Ray and I could pursue the more important issue of who served the best mojito in Havana. My friend Howard Schneider, a GOAT editor, if there ever was one, points out to me that I was able to handle these stories because of the strong foundation and training I had as a beat reporter from Newsday. I started with the Smithtown Knights, not that much happening, but allowed me to be among the first to be called into a big local story. My editors included tough-minded, sometimes intimidating, that's an understatement, figures such as the recently departed Mel Opatowski and Tony Insolia. And then I was assigned to be part of the legendary investigative Green team. That's Bob Green, Newsday's Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, and incidentally a major force in the creation and the building of the PCLI. I'll never forget the look of incredulity on Bob's face when he started discussing some dirty dealing he had uncovered between a Democrat and a Republican. That can't be, I said. They are different parties. Bob pursed his lips and with utter disdain said, "You obviously have not heard of the practice of bipartisan thievery." Among the other lessons learned from being on the Green team, always check a suspect's garbage can for evidence. and learn who the notary publics were for the big movers and shakers who didn't want their names associated with a particular transaction. You know, it's only in retrospect that I realized how fortunate I was to be a journalist during that golden period. Today, even the Washington Post is grappling with economic realities of our information business. But the other reality is that journalism, good journalism, reporter journalism, journalism based on the facts, the types of journalism that Newsday did and is still doing, is more important than ever. And the students I worked with at Stony Brook School of Journalism, and before that at Hofstra, are as bright and inquisitive as any journalists I have known. Indeed, your board member, J.D. Allen, was a student of mine at Stony Brook, and your president, Brendan O'Reilly, was a student in the class I taught at Hofstra. To me, being a reporter, whether in Smithtown or Esfahan, Hauppauge or Tel Aviv, is still a great job. To paraphrase Tip O'Neill, all reporting is local. There was never a day when I didn't look forward to going to work. I miss not having a press card. I miss traveling to all parts of the world, not as a tourist, but as a reporter, learning, contacting people, developing sources, making friendships that would last a lifetime. And I miss the other great job I had as editorial page editor, debating each other over the issues, great and small, local, national, and international, at the daily editorial board meetings. Joy describes it as if I were a power broker. I never thought I was. In fact, I used to ask candidates whether they want us to come out against them or for them. But I did enjoy hearing Al DeMono greet me with, Jimmy, why can't you just be friends? Or aggravating an unnamed big shot pal to the point where he lobbied Ray Jansen to have me fired. But your recognition tonight is hugely appreciated. Thank you, thank you, thank you.